The day my mother was buried, my sister cried loudest at the graveside. She wore black silk and held a white handkerchief she never actually used. I noticed that. I noticed things like that. My wife stood beside me with her hand resting on my arm, but it wasn't the kind of hand that holds you up. It was the kind that reminds you she's there. There's a difference, and at 63 years old, I know it well. My name is Nolan. I spent 31 years as a land surveyor for the county. Not glamorous, not the kind of work that gets mentioned at dinner parties. My sister, I'll call her Diane, married well twice. The second time she married a man named Preston who owned 4 car dealerships in the Carolinas. They lived in a house with a fountain in the front yard. An actual fountain. My wife, Claire, never said she resented that, but she said other things. Little things. Diane's kitchen was redone last year. Did you see the countertops? Or Preston got her a new SUV for her birthday. That's the kind of man who shows up. She said them lightly, like observations. But they landed heavy. My mother had a house in eastern Tennessee, a small rental property in Kingsport, and 11 acres of land outside Rogersville that she'd inherited from her own father back in 1974. The house was worth something. The rental brought in about $800 a month. The 11 acres? My wife called it that scrubby piece of nothing out in the holler. She said it every time it came up. Scrubby piece of nothing. The will was read 3 weeks after the funeral. My mother left Diane the house and the rental property. She left me the 11 acres. I sat in the attorney's office and kept my face still. I'm good at that. Claire was not. On the drive home, she said, "So we got the worthless land, and Diane got everything that actually generates income. That's your inheritance, 11 acres of weeds." I didn't answer. Your mother always favored her. I still didn't answer. Nolan, did you hear me? I heard you. We didn't speak again until we got home. That night I went out to the back porch and sat in the dark for a while, not thinking about money, thinking about my mother. She was a quiet woman who never explained herself much. She used to say that land was the one thing God stopped making. She said it more than once, usually when she was looking out a window at something I couldn't quite see. I wondered what she saw in those 11 acres. I wondered why she gave them to me. Diane called the next morning. She was warm about it, the way she always is when she's gotten what she wanted. "I hope you're not upset about the land," she said. "You know how Mama was. She had her reasons." I'm sure she did. "Preston thinks we might be able to help you unload it if you want. He knows a developer down in Morristown who buys rural parcels. Probably won't get much, but something's better than nothing, right?" I said I'd think about it. Claire overheard. She came into the kitchen and said, "Tell her yes. What are we going to do with 11 acres in Rogersville? Drive up there and look at it?" "Maybe." She looked at me the way she does when she thinks I'm being deliberately obtuse. "Nolan, be realistic." I drove up to Rogersville the following Saturday alone. Claire had plans with her friend from church, which was fine. I needed to go alone. I'd been to the land maybe 4 times in my life. Once as a kid, once when my grandfather was still alive and showed me how to walk the creek line, and twice with my father before he passed. I didn't know it well. I knew it had a tree line on the north end, a creek running through the lower third, and a dirt access road off Route 66 that turned to mud in the rain. What I didn't expect was how quiet it was. I parked the truck and walked in from the gate. The grass was high, but not unmanageable. The creek was running clear. There was a survey stake on the northwest corner that I almost missed under a tangle of blackberry brambles. I only spotted it because I knew what to look for. 31 years of staring at survey stakes will do that. I stood at the creek for a long time. Then I walked the full perimeter the way I used to walk job sites, slow, deliberate, taking notes in my head out of habit. On the eastern edge, near the old fence line, I found something I didn't recognize. It was a gray, metal conduit box, maybe 2 feet square, bolted to a concrete pad that had been poured flush with the ground. Newer concrete, not 50 years old. There was a utility marker stake nearby, orange-tipped, with a code I didn't recognize offhand. And running from the box toward the north, just beneath the surface, a slight linear depression in the soil. The kind of depression that forms over buried infrastructure. I photographed everything with my phone. Then I drove into town and stopped at the county assessor's office before it closed. The woman at the counter pulled up the parcel record. Standard stuff. Then I asked her about utility easements on record for that parcel. She typed for a moment and then looked at the screen a little longer than I expected. "There's a recorded easement here from 2019, she said. "State Broadband Infrastructure Project. Looks like a fiber conduit easement across the eastern portion of the parcel, about 400 linear feet. Who's the holder?" She read off the name of a state infrastructure authority I'd heard of in passing, a public utility entity, part of the Tennessee statewide broadband expansion they'd announced a few years back. Rural internet access, funded partly federal, partly state. Is there a compensation agreement on record? She looked again. There's a reference to a separate instrument filed with the Register of Deeds. I thanked her and drove to the Register of Deeds office, which was 3 blocks away. It was 3:45 in the afternoon. They closed at 4:30. The instrument was a right-of-way compensation agreement signed by my mother in 2019. She had granted the easement in exchange for an annual payment, indexed to inflation, for the duration of active use of the conduit. As long as fiber ran through that ground, the landowner received a check every year. The current annual payment was listed at $22,400. I sat in the parking lot of the Register of Deeds office and read the document 3 times on my phone camera. $22,400 per year, indexed to inflation, for as long as that fiber line was active. My mother had known. She'd known the whole time. I didn't tell Claire that night. I'm not proud of that, but I needed to think first. I needed to understand what I actually had before I said anything out loud. I spent the next week making calls. I called the Infrastructure Authority directly to confirm the agreement was still active and would transfer with the property to a new owner. It would. These agreements run with the land, not with the person. I called a real estate attorney in Knoxville, a man named Walter Gaines, who specialized in rural property and easement law. I laid out the situation and asked him to review the documents. He called me back 2 days later. "The easement and compensation agreement are valid and fully transferable," he said. "The annual payment transfers automatically to any new owner of record. There's no sunset clause. The only termination condition is if the utility decommissions the line, and given the current state and federal investment in rural broadband, that's unlikely in any foreseeable horizon." "What's the present value of that income stream?" I asked. If someone wanted to think about it that way. He was quiet for a moment. "At the current payment rate, indexed at even a modest inflation rate over 30 years, you're looking at somewhere between $800,000 and $1.2 million in total payments. That's before you consider any development value of the land itself, or any future renegotiation of the easement rate." I wrote that number down on a notepad and stared at it. Then I called the Infrastructure Authority again and asked one more question, whether the fiber line was part of a network segment that might be expanded. The project manager I reached was careful with his words, but confirmed that the Rogersville corridor had been flagged for a secondary conduit installation to increase capacity. Additional right-of-way negotiations with the landowner would be required. Additional compensation would be required. I thanked him and hung up. Diane called that weekend. She said Preston's developer contact was ready to make an offer on the parcel. He was thinking somewhere in the range of $40,000 to $50,000. She said it like she was doing me a favor. "I haven't decided what I'm doing with it yet," I said. A pause. "Nolan, what is there to decide? It's 11 acres of rural Tennessee. The longer you hold it, the more taxes you pay. The property taxes are $340 a year, Diane. That's not the point. Preston says the developer is motivated. You should take it while he's interested. I'll let you know." She was quiet for a moment. Then carefully, "Is Claire on the same page as you?" I said. "Claire and I are talking about it. That was technically true. We just hadn't started the conversation yet. I told Claire on a Sunday evening after dinner. I laid the documents on the kitchen table. The easement agreement, Walter Gaines's written assessment, the payment history I'd requested and received from the authority. She picked up the first page and read it. Then she read it again. "This has been paying out since 2019? Her voice was different. "Careful. Yes, the back payments that didn't reach my mother because of administrative delay, those are recoverable. Walter says we can likely collect 3 years of arrears." She set the paper down. "That's over $60,000 just in what's already owed, more or less." She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Why didn't your mother tell anyone?" "I think she told the one person she thought would actually read the paperwork." Claire looked up at me. "She was a surveyor's wife for 28 years, I said. "She knew how I think." That was the moment, not dramatic, not a scene, just her looking at me and understanding something she hadn't understood before. Diane found out through Preston, who found out through his developer contact, who apparently made a few inquiries before making his offer and discovered there was an active state easement on the parcel. The developer had pulled out immediately. An encumbered parcel with a compensation agreement was not what he wanted. Diane called me furious. "You knew," she said. "You already knew when I called you about the offer." I was still reviewing the documents. "Nolan, the developer said this easement has been active for years. Mama knew, you knew, and you let Preston." "I didn't let Preston do anything. He made inquiries on a property he doesn't own and never will. This isn't fair." I thought about the white handkerchief she never used at the graveside. I thought about the fountain in her front yard. I thought about the countertops and the SUV and the 31 years I spent walking county parcels in all kinds of weather so I could read a plat map the way other people read a newspaper. "Mama left you the house," I said. "She left you the rental income. She left me the land." "That was her decision, Diane, not mine." She said something else. I don't fully remember it. I said goodbye and ended the call. I've been retired for 14 months now. Claire and I drive up to Rogersville sometimes on weekends. We have a folding table and chairs we set up near the creek. She brings a thermos of coffee. I walk the fence line the way my grandfather walked it with me when I was a boy. The Infrastructure Authority came back last spring with the request I've been expecting, the secondary conduit installation. Walter Gaines handled the negotiation. The new right-of-way agreement added an additional $14,800 per year to the compensation package with a renegotiation clause tied to the Consumer Price Index. The combined annual payment is now $37,200. It goes up every 2 years. I used part of the arrears settlement to pay off the remaining balance on our house. The rest sits in a fund Claire and I set up with a fee-only financial advisor, not the guy at the bank who sells products, an actual fiduciary. We're drawing it down slowly. We don't need much. Last fall, a small agricultural land trust reached out about a conservation easement on the creek corridor. That's a separate conversation, but Walter says if we structure it right, there are significant tax advantages, and it would permanently protect the water quality on that end of the property. My mother would have liked that. I don't tell this story to make anyone feel bad. I'm past the age where I need to score points. But I do think about my mother and what she understood about people, about which son would drive up to Rogersville alone on a Saturday and walk the fence line, about which son would stop at the assessor's office before it closed. She knew I wouldn't sell fast. She knew I'd look first. She used to say that the problem with most people is they only see what's on the surface. Weeds, scrub, creek mud. They don't think about what's underneath, what's been laid down quietly over years. What keeps running whether anyone's watching or not. I walked that land my whole life seeing nothing in it. She left it to me anyway. That's the kind of faith that takes a long time to understand. I'm still working on it. The creek still runs clear. The fiber still runs under that eastern field, carrying data I'll never see to people I'll never meet, and once a year a check arrives that says someone, somewhere, decided this land was worth something after all. My mother decided that 50 years before they ever broke ground. She just waited for me to catch up. I've had a lot of time to sit with this story. Retired men have that time. You stop running from one obligation to the next, and suddenly there's space to actually think about what happened and why. What I keep coming back to isn't the money, it's the sequence of it. The way every decision Diane made and every word Claire said and every assumption Preston put into a phone call, all of it moved in one direction because of who they believed I was. The quiet one, the one with the county job and the sensible truck and no fountain in the front yard. They looked at me and saw a man who wouldn't look closely, who'd take the path of least resistance, who'd call the developer back and say yes, because what else was he going to do? That's the thing about being underestimated for a long time. People stop covering their tracks around you. They move fast because they assume you won't move at all. My mother understood something different. She watched me for 63 years, watched me walk property lines in the rain, watched me pull survey stakes out of blackberry brambles, watched me read plat maps the way other people read the sports page. She didn't leave me those 11 acres because she felt sorry for me. She left them to me because she knew I was the only one who would actually go look. That's not luck. That's cause and effect, playing out over decades. I think about Claire saying, "scrubby piece of nothing," every time the land came up. She wasn't wrong based on what she could see, but seeing the surface and understanding what's underneath are two entirely different skills, and she'd never had reason to develop the second one. Neither had Diane. Neither had Preston. They'd all spent their lives making fast judgments about visible things, house size, car model, job title, and being right often enough that they never questioned the method. I spent 31 years learning that what you can see on the surface will mislead you almost every time. You have to get out of the truck. You have to walk the fence line. You have to stop at the assessor's office before it closes. That's not a philosophy I read somewhere. It's just what the work taught me. There's a version of the story where I take Preston's offer. $45,000, quick close, problem solved. Claire would have been satisfied. Diane would have been gracious about it in that particular way she has. And the fiber would have kept running under that eastern field, sending its annual check to whoever bought the parcel, and I never would have known. I don't say that to be dramatic. I say it because the margin between those two outcomes was one Saturday afternoon and the habit of looking before I decided. That's all it was. A habit built over a lifetime of slow, unglamorous work. My mother knew. She waited. She left me the thing that would only reveal itself to the right kind of attention. I think that's what she wanted me to understand. Not that I was smarter than my sister, not that Claire was wrong about everything, but that patience and precision are their own kind of inheritance. The kind nobody can contest in a will. The kind that compounds quietly over years until one afternoon you're standing in a parking lot outside the Register of Deeds office reading a number on your phone camera and finally understanding what your mother saw when she looked out the window all those years ago. The creek still runs. The fiber still carries its data through the dark, and once a year the check arrives.